Hi everybody, my name is Keith Mayerson. This is my show Kings and Queens. I thought I'd take you around and show you a little bit what it's about. We start out here with Marcel Proust, who is the great writer of Remembrance of Things Past. This was a picture of him after he saw Vermeer's view of Delft. He then passed away soon after that. He wrote in his novel Remembrance of Things Past about a critic who sees this painting and he evaluates all of his life against the way that Vermeer painted the yellow door in that painting. And then he passes away. I hope I don't pass away after painting this painting, but I wanted to capture the idea of the sort of sublime feeling that resonated right after he saw that picture. This brings us into the rest of the show, and hopefully he's thinking about the past. You know, in this show, a lot of my work that I've done involves ideas of narratives. When I was working on this exhibition, I realized that it really was a little bit like The Last Judgment. I'm not a religious person, but I'm a very spiritual person, and if a heaven were ever to exist, or The Last Judgment were ever to exist, maybe these would be the kings and queens, or his saints and elect that would surround him like this people do in that painting. This is from my own private Idaho. This is River and Keanu as Mike and Scott in my own private Idaho, which was a seminal movie for me growing up. It was one of the first films that came out when I first started grad school. And I used Keanu and River ever since then as part of my narratives in the same way that, I don't know, a director would employ actors again and again in his films. Keanu and River always make appearances. I want to make the best River and Keanu painting I've ever done. You know, River was the son of hippies. He was a starry-eyed utopic thinker, and really, in a fundamental way, I think wanted to make change with his art and his craft. Keanu, I love as a figure because I think he represents sort of a post-slacker masculinity, where it's not being a John Wayne person who aggressively kills people all the time, or he's not the seducer, he's always the one who's being seduced. And so I think he represents sort of a Gen X kind of idea of what it is to be a man, where he's sort of catching the balls instead of throwing them and trying to make do within this world. This is as if the camera sort of pans back and you would sort of see this world. This is King Kong and Fay Ray battle a giant pterodactyl. King Kong for me is an incredibly important movie. I teach it in my senior seminar at NYU in the sort of voodoo nature of stop motion animation. It's so fake, it's real. This film really recreates this world and makes it completely come alive. It was also inspired, I think, by the murals by Charles Knight at the Natural History Museum, who was an artist who worked with biologists and scientists, but came up with his own ideas of what dinosaurs look like that in a fundamental way changed the way that we perceive dinosaurs in that world. It was also inspired by Gustave Doré. Ultimately, King Kong represents humanity at a time where, you know, humanity is sort of thwarted, and maybe our primal urges to save our mate could cause the sort of misabuse of power that's happening in our culture today with Iraq and things like that. So I think about this all allegorically. I also titled it Temptation on the Mount after the famous Duccio painting that's at the Frick, because in that painting it's sort of Christ who's telling the devil to go away. And I kind of feel like this is King Kong doing the same thing with the pterodactyl, trying to thwart away evil to save his mate. And then it's as if the camera pans back and we see the planet Jupiter, which may be where all this is transpiring. Jupiter is the king planet, obviously the biggest one. It was also the Roman name for Zeus, the greatest god. I was thinking of it as an allegory of our world. If we're so reliant on fossil fuels, hopefully we don't become a gas planet like Jupiter. So it sort of has an ominous note. Also, though, I teach ideas of Kant to my NYU class, ideas of the sublime, and what the sublime is when you're a small part of a much bigger thing that you can't put a frame around, and it gives you sort of this ineffable feeling, sort of the feeling that I hope to, you know, aspire to with people looking at my artwork and my shows. With this painting, it's as if James Dean at the observatory is looking at Jupiter. This is actually called Rebel at the Observatory. And this is from the movie Rebel Without a Cause, and this is the scene when they're in the famous Griffith Observatory and they watch the whole extravaganza about the end of the world, and he turns around and looks at Salminio behind him and he says, "The world blew up, it's okay, we could come out now." In the Michelangelo Last Judgment painting, which a lot of this is inspired by, at the bottom of that painting, they have angels sort of looking at you, the viewer, saying, like, watch what's going to happen, watch out, this is a warning, don't let this happen. And I kind of think that hopefully James Dean is a rebel angel who's sort of saying the same thing. Behind him is the Griffith Observatory Tower projector, but I like, again, like how this sort of breaks apart into sort of this wild abstraction. I teach a class about Japanese animation at the School of Visual Arts, and I kind of feel like maybe this is like a giant robot who's, looking at the apocalypse. Some people have said it's a spaceship, which I like. I like the idea of looking at these and seeing like little figures in here and little dreamlike things that are happening. With all these pictures, they're inspired by Rembrandt. Actually, there's this great movie by King Court of Charles Laughton's Rembrandt, and there's this one scene in that film where he's painting this homeless person dressed as King Saul, and the homeless person says, "Why are you paying me? I'm just a homeless guy." And Charles Laughton as Rembrandt says, "No, no, no. You represent King Saul. It means this and this and this to me." And he goes into this whole teary-eyed soliloquy of vanity of vanities, everything is vanity. And I realized at that time that portrait painting, that all of Rembrandt, was really about setting up an allegorical situation that meant something to him. And while he was thinking about what it meant to him, negotiating the abstract notions of positive and negative space, all these right-brain scenarios, hopefully his subconscious, the emotion, leaks through. So when you see Rembrandt paintings now, you might not know what they're about or who those people are, but you feel the emotion. That's what I'm striving for in this work. This is a painting from one of the early Louisiana hayride concerts that Elvis performed in 1956. And Elvis watched Rebel Without a Cause countless times, and James Dean was his hero and inspired him to create rock and roll. Obviously, a musical genre that's never gone out of style, that changed the world in a fundamental way. He's accused sometimes of being a colonialist, just like Picasso when he got his ideas for Demoiselle d'Avignon from Etruscan masks and sculptures and works from Africa. He was inspired by gospel singers, but he was also inspired by hillbilly and country music, and he and his musicians fused together these sounds to create an incredibly new, dynamic musical movement that obviously gave birth to the latter half of the 20th century. And this is the beginning of it. When you listen to these early Louisiana hayride performances, they sound really raw. They sound very much like punk rock. Nobody knew what was going on. Nobody knew what was happening. This is one of the Louisiana hayride directors who was freaking out at this performance because the kids were going wild and they didn't know if they could contain what was happening. Elvis was a religious person, and I think of this in a way as a religious painting. This was actually scenes from behind him in the high school gym or wherever they were. These stars are hanging down, but I was sort of thinking of it as, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. He's a little bit like the second coming. Maybe he had a little bit of a Christ thing happening in his own life. I think of this as being a cross. The critics were saying that what he was doing was evil, and I wonder if he, in his own life, was wondering, oh my gosh, is this a good thing that I'm doing, or is it bad? What am I bringing upon us, and so on. It did change the world. I tried to capture the movement. I was really happy with some of these things that kind of euphorically came out when I listened to the music. All the time when I'm doing any of these paintings, I listen to the music, I watch the biographies, I'm reading the biographies, I'm reading all about them to immerse myself completely into the world to hopefully bring out the essence of what was going on. Even this guitar, I didn't realize until later that this was a leather case that was over the guitar. I was painting it, and couldn't figure it out. I wanted to get to the essence of it, and after I finished it, I realized it was a leather case. Hopefully that comes out in the picture. Hopefully the moon, the emotion, and the motion of it comes out. I always think he's sort of looking up as well as he's looking across and so on. Anyway, hopefully a historical painting of sorts of the birth of rock and roll.